Hey everyone, welcome back to Trek on the Tube. Star Trek Discovery Season 1 is coming to an end, but before we talk about the soon-to-come season finale, we need to talk about Star Trek Discovery Season 1 Episode 14, The War Within, The War Without. And boy is there a lot to talk about. Before we begin, I do want to take a moment to say I love all the episode titles. I think they're really well chosen. Each time they manage to both wrap up the theme or the feel of the episode without giving too much away. I know it's not that important, but I did want to mention it. I am slightly disappointed we never get to see them on screen, but I guess that's just me. It doesn't take away or add to the quality of the episode, so it's fine. Okay, so episode 14. A lot of things happened, and yet the episode was slightly slow-paced. Not that that's a bad thing. Quite the contrary, I think it gave us all time to catch our breath before the big conclusion, and it provided some closure and answers concerning the multiple story arcs we've been following. It's just that, by being slower, it gave me more time to reflect on the issues that I have with the series in general. One of which, and I'm sorry to go over this again so I'll try to be quick, are the Klingons. Yes, they look different, and yeah, that still bugs me, but that's a debate for another day. What I want to talk about today are the changes that run deeper than just aesthetics. You see, it's established in this episode that all of the Klingon houses are destroying civilian colonies, and frankly, that's not Klingon. A point is made to explain that because they have no leadership, they're kind of all over the place, and the original series does describe them as a military dictatorship with war being their way of life, but for a Klingon there's honor in battle. Destroying a cargo ship, killing thousands of civilians isn't battle, and it's certainly not honorable. It's small and sad, and excuse my cliche racism, but that's something I see the Romulans doing, or the Cardassians, not the Klingons. Their behavior simply doesn't seem to match the pre-existing profile. It would seem that Star Trek Discovery, sadly, in a quest to make the Klingons more relatable, simply made me hate them, and question everything they represent. Continuing with general complaints, I did want to point out that the impact of death isn't very well executed throughout this first season. Millions are dead, or at least hundreds of thousands, and no one truly seems to be bothered by it. I get it, they're on a mission, they'll have time to grieve later, but in Enterprise, when the Xindi weapon attacked Earth, we saw that have a direct impact on the crew, Trip in particular. I mean, if every major starbase or outpost has been destroyed or taken over, chances are people on the Discovery have lost family members, friends. I don't know, it just feels kind of unnatural, the way they're all unaffected by it. Okay, that's about it for major complaints, and since I don't really know how to transition into what I want to say next, I guess here it is. A lot of this season's stories and loose ends were neatly wrapped up in this episode, and that pleased me. You see, last week Mirror Lorca died immediately after taking the Terran Empire for himself, and our hero ship managed to escape the Mirror Universe with ease, and all of that felt rushed because it was crammed into an action-packed episode. It would have been nice to further develop these moments. But this episode was different. Even if the explanations or payoffs were very simple and straightforward, they made sense, and I didn't get the feeling I invested so much time in a story that ultimately led to very little. So it's explained that the ISS Discovery was destroyed by Klingons as soon as it crossed over to the Prime Timeline. It's a shame we didn't see that ship, but it's fine. Moving on, at least it doesn't create any continuity errors. It's also pretty much established Prime Lorca is dead because he never would have survived the Mirror Universe alone. Okay, fair enough. It's also said knowledge of the Mirror Universe, how to get there, and the fact the Emperor is with them will be classified and destroyed. Awesome. Not only would that finish the story nicely, but it also ties well into canon, as 10 years later in the original series no one knows about the Mirror Universe. We also learn Vok is dead, or supposedly. I don't yet know whether we're going to keep on following the story of the now very troubled Ash Tyler, but it's nice to see that story come to an end as well. And here's the thing. The Mirror Lorca story ultimately had no real payoff. It lasted 10 episodes out of 15 and served essentially no purpose. It just swiftly came to an end. The Vok storyline has a long-term payoff because it ties back into the original series. Later on, we'll see other Klingons posing as humans, and we now know Vok was the test subject. Okay, moving on. Visually, this episode was stunning. CG-wise, not only did we get some long-lasting beauty shots of the ship and a really nice-looking starbase, but we also got an awesome terraforming sequence. I know the whole terraforming thing might seem like a canon breach, but I really don't think it is. Stamets only knows how to terraform with his specific spore drive-related mushrooms. I don't think he'd be able to grow an actual ecosystem or develop an atmosphere suitable for human life. The sets were great too. The bridge was lit differently. This conference room featured a table that reminded me both of the original series and the Next Generation. And then we got a kind of inside view of the warp core. I loved that. I still don't like the holographic displays though. They don't make sense. That technology is far too advanced for this time period in Star Trek, and the worst thing about it is sometimes it feels more like magic than technology. See how in engineering there's a box there? A hollow emitter? That at least justifies the display above it. but on the bridge the hologram is just there, in the middle. One could assume there are holo emitters all over the bridge because that's how they communicate, but it's such a departure from everything that we've seen up until now that I just can't accept it. And don't get me started on how they move things around as they talk. It's so generic science fiction. Ugh. Alright, it was great to see Andorian and Tellarite Starfleet officers though. Alien diversity has been greatly lacking in Star Trek for years, especially when it comes to the founding members of the Federation. One would expect to see them everywhere, so Discovery did a really good job there. I know a few people are complaining about the voice modifier they have on the Andorians, but it's fine for me. I just like to imagine these ones we've seen recently have deeper voices. It's a detail I can get over. I am happy they still have the moving antennae though. That's a nice touch. As usual, the episode featured some great character moments, mainly Saru. For the first time ever on the show, I felt the character really worked. And not just as a character, but also as a captain, believe it or not. He reassures Tyler. He orders the officer in the transporter room to stay quiet about the Emperor. He doesn't order Burnham to talk to Tyler, and even though he ultimately makes the decision to warp away from Starbase 1, he still respects and acknowledges Cornwell's authority. I still believe his growth was awkwardly handled overall, but in this episode, Saru worked. And then there's the similarities between this episode and The Next Generation. That really helped me feel like I was watching a Star Trek show as opposed to a Star Trek-like show. The bridge was nicely lit. We got long character moments with plenty of dialogue, including conference room conversations. The terraforming mission felt like many of the missions Geordi had to take care of. The hallway shots, turbolift shots, somehow this episode felt closer to home. And in conclusion, it was good. Not necessarily great, but it was good. Okay, Easter eggs and references. Let's go. We start with the controversial Starbase 1. I say controversial because for quite a while now, Star Trek fans have assumed this was Starbase 1, and so seeing this came as a surprise. But as it stands, this has only ever been called Space Dock or Earth Space Dock, so what Discovery showed us technically works. Of course, then there's the Kelvin timeline, which has this Starbase 1, but that's something else entirely. We then hear about Starbase 12. Nothing important to say there, except that it's been mentioned many times over the years in many iterations of Star Trek, but it's never been shown on screen. Interestingly, Discovery seems to follow in that tradition. Cornwell mentions Captain Archer and the NX-01. She talks about how they went to Kronos around 100 years ago. I'm assuming she's talking about Archer's very first mission, but it could be some other event we haven't yet seen. She also talks about a ship called the USS Saratoga. That ship name has already been used at least twice in the franchise, in Deep Space Nine and in the movies. It's probably not the same ship, of course, but it's the same name. The last Easter egg is actually huge because it's a map of Kronos, and that's never been seen before. There were many things that I couldn't read, and others that have no meaning to me, but I thought we could have some fun and point out some of the big names and explain how they tie into canon. You will have to excuse my pronunciation though, because I'm not fluent in Klingon. So here we go. The Lake of Lusa, that's where Kahless forged his Batleth, as explained in The Next Generation. The Central Plains area, also mentioned in The Next Generation. Kang's Summit, that's where Martok was captured by the Dominion in Deep Space Nine. River Skrull, or here on the map Skrull River, mentioned both in Deep Space Nine and Voyager. It seems to be pretty famous since it comes up both in song and legend. The Caves of Nomad, where Worf had his first vision of Kahless, mentioned in both The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. The Caves of Kahless, first shown on the holodeck in Voyager, but never actually named. It would seem Discovery took the name from non-canon sources. And finally, I'm pretty sure that says First City. Obviously capital of the planet and the entire Klingon Empire. Okay, there you go. If you can figure out more, please leave a comment below. Thank you so much for watching. As usual, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and live long and prosper.